C3 we are calling solving quadratic equations. Okay, so we are going to use what we've been learning with breaking down radicals in order to solve quadratic equations. So by the way, what is the quadratic equation? How does that go? Standard form of quadratic. Oh boy. Starts with an A. Number A, x squared. There you go. Okay. So those are our quadratics. And we're going to have them be equal to some number. So we're solving for the values of x. Okay, so I'm going to show you two different methods in order to solve quadratics. There are more than two methods, and I'll show you a couple more later. But today, just these two. Okay, so the first one is solve by taking the square root. And the second one is going to be solved by the quadratic formula. Okay, so the square root method. First of all, it is very important of the form that you see the original equation in. Okay, so for this particular equation, you would be able to use the square root method. What do you notice is different about the way this piece is written versus the one before that? There's no b. Okay, so when there's only an x squared and there's no x term, you can use the square root method. Okay, so basically all you're going to do is isolate your x value. Okay, so here is A. You don't have to write this down. This is kind of just a quick explanation. Okay, so the first step would be to add the 5 over. Okay, then you divide by 4. And then after you divide by 4, what's the last step? You square root it. Okay, now the difference in this particular example versus the one I'm going to allow you to do, this gives you a decimal answer. Are you going to give me a decimal answer? No. No way. Okay, I want exact answers, no approximating. Okay, so let's do one. So for question number 4, I am isolating the x. What's my first step? Subtract the 6. So I have minus 6, so I have 3x squared is equal to 33 minus 6 is 27. Okay, then what would I have to do? Divide by 3. Good. So that would make x squared equal to 9. And then how do I get rid of the square?
Square root of
I square root it. So, what's the square root of 9? 3. So, is there any other possible scenario that would make this equation true besides 3?
negative 3.
A negative 3.
Plus or minus 3.
Okay, so when we are solving an equation and we take a square root, we always need to have a plus or minus because there's two ways that we can get 9. We can have 3 squared equal 9, and we can also have negative 3 equals 9. Right? 2 answers. So how many answers are we going to be coming up with every time we solve a quadratic? 2 answers. Okay? Is it possible to have not 2 answers?
No. But, yeah.
It's possible.
1x equals 0.
Okay, so yeah, it's possible, well, not necessarily at 0. Well, you can have a 0 and a different number. That's possible. But it is possible to have one solution on a quadratic, and it's possible to have a no solution. Just so you're aware of that, it's not a blanket statement that all quadratics have 2. But today they all have 2. Okay, so what about number 5? This is a really good example. I like this one. What do I do first? I do add 9 first. So that gives me 5x squared is equal to 11. And then what? Divide by 5. And 11 divided by 5 is?
2 divided by 5.
Exactly 11 fifths, yeah. Perfect. Okay, now what do I do? I take a square root. So, What's the square root of 11 fifths? Well, that's not wrong, yeah. Okay, but is it simplified? Can I leave it as a square root of 11 fifths? How do I take a square root of a fraction? Minus? No minusing. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're just going to take the square root of the top and take the square root of the bottom. Okay, so I have the square root of 11 over the square root of 5. Okay, so now I want to see if I can break that. Can I break the square root of 11?
No.
No. Can I break the square root of 5?
No.
No. Can I leave it like that?
Yeah, I suppose. Plus or minus.
No.
Very good. You cannot have a square root in the denominator. Okay, we went over this before. Do you guys remember how to get rid of the square root in the denominator? Okay, good. We're going to multiply by 1, but we're going to make 1 look really cool. What's our 1 value going to be? Close. The square root of 5 over the square root of 5. See where I got the square root of 5 from? Or technically, Jolyn got the square root of 5. Okay, the square root of 5, I'm just multiplying by the value of 1 using the denominator. Okay, so now I'm going to multiply straight across. I can multiply innards together and I can multiply outers together. In this case, I have two innards. So what's 11 times 5? 55. So I have the square root of 55. And on the bottom, what's the square root of 5 times the square root of 5? Square root of 25, which is 5. Look at that magic. Now there's no radical in the bottom. And what do I need to add to my answer? Plus or minus. Remember, I'm getting two solutions.
Please excuse the interruption. I need Hannah Vance to report to the main office. Hannah Vance, thank you.
Okay, so there's one other way that you can solve by using the square root method. And it looks like this particular form. Okay, so what does that form look like to you?
Like the one where we did the thing.
Yeah, no, not that one. Yeah, quadratic, but it had a specific name. Vertex form. Okay, so it looks like vertex form, but it's like the h values on the other side. Okay, so when you see something that looks like the vertex form, you can use the square root method. Okay, so it's mostly the same, but the first step is to isolate the squared piece. Okay, and in this scenario, you would have a whole quantity that is squared. Okay, so if you had adding or subtracting on the outside of the x squared, you would want to get rid of it first. Okay, or divide by it, whatever's on the outside. Okay, this one doesn't have anything on the outside, so it immediately goes into getting rid of the square. So it's square roots, and it has a square root of 36. What's a square root of 36? 6. And since I'm solving an equation, what do I have to add to it? What's in front of the 6? Plus or minus. Okay, so on this particular example, my last step is to then subtract 5, but I have a 6 and I have a negative 6. So I'm going to do two separate things. I'm going to start by subtracting 5 from 6 and subtracting 5 from negative 6 to get two very different solutions. Okay, so notice that it's not a plus or minus to some number. We get negative 11 and 1. Okay, so let's do an example of that. Okay, so for this question, number 7, what would you do first? No. If there was not a squared, you could distribute. But it's always easiest to get rid of it, actually. Divide by it. Even if there was not a squared and you were solving, I would divide by 4 first because it's less work. So if we divide by 4, we would have x plus 10 squared is equal to, what's 24 divided by 4? 6. Okay, then what would you do? Distribute the, you mean square root? There was a lot of different words in there. So take the square root of both sides. There you go. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I'm going to have x plus 10. So the square root eliminated the square. And what's the square root of 6? Can I break a square root of 6?
No.
No. So I'm going to leave it as a plus or minus square root of 6. Okay, so remember I'm isolating the x. What's my last step if I have plus 10? Subtract 10. So I'm going to subtract 10. Now watch how I write my answer. X is going to equal, can I combine square roots with constants, by the way? No. It's going to be negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 6. Done. How many answers did I just write? 2 answers. One for the plus and one for the minus. There's 2 answers written there. Everybody good there? Okay, what about question number 8? How would I solve that one? Okay, good. I start by square rooting this one. So I'm going to take the square root. So that gives me x minus 9. So what's the square root of 64? 8. So what do I need to add on to it? Plus or minus. So really there's 2 numbers there. What's my last step? Close. Add 9. Good. Okay, so can we do this in our heads? What is 8 plus 9? 17. And then what is negative 8 plus 1? I mean 9. So 1. Dang it. I always do that in this class. I don't do it anywhere. Negative 8 plus 9 is 1. Did everybody follow that? Sorry, I kind of screwed that up. Good? Perfect. Okay, so those are solving by taking the square root. Okay, so that's very algebraic. There's nothing really fancy about it. Okay, the second method today is by using the quadratic formula. So if any person beyond this math class heard the word quadratic formula, I think they know what it would be. Yeah, they all know it. If you're in pre-calculus, if you're in calculus or AP calculus, they have it all memorized. Why do you think that happens? They have to use it over and over and over, and you study new things, and the quadratic formula keeps coming back. It keeps coming back to haunt you. Dun, dun, dun. There it is. Quadratic formula, right there. Highlight it in your notes, make it look beautiful. Tattoo it on your hand if you have to.
Is that actually a song?
Yeah, it is.
It kind of sounded like a song. That was kind of cool.
What was that, Hayden?
We like when I learned this, we learned a song.
We started singing.
Yeah, there's we go into YouTube
Yeah.
and look on quadratic formula. There's tons of different songs. Yeah, we should do that after I do this today. We'll go look on YouTube.
I'll probably remember that now, though.
Okay, so the important thing for you to realize, this formula comes from our quadratic form, that one I wrote down before, ax squared plus bx plus c, and it is imperative that the function is set equal, or excuse me, the equation is set equal to 0 in order for you to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so that will always be the first step in finding the solution to a quadratic equation. Set it equal to 0 if you're using quadratic formula. So, bottom line, a is the number that's in front of the x squared, b is the number in front of the x, and c is the constant value. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's do it. I'm going to go past this stuff. By the way, up there I had, in case you're interested, how the quadratic formula is derived. Oh, you can't even see that, sorry. I'm sure there's somebody in here that's interested in that. But if you're interested in that, you can go through that, check it out. It's kind of cool. You might have to do a little bit of research to figure it out. Anyways, where was I? How about, boom, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so quadratic formula, the first thing I want to do is figure out what my a value is, my b value is, and my c value is. For this equation, what is my a value? 1. What is my b value? Close.
Negative.
Negative 6. What is my c value? Negative 7. Okay, so here it goes. I'm going to write down the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Alright, so negative b. What is my negative b value? 6. Good. So positive 6 plus or minus my b value squared, 6 squared, minus 4 times a. What's my a value?
Oh,
What were you going to ask me? Because I think it's a good question, I think. If you're going to ask what I think you're going to ask.
why didn't you put the negative in there, but that's outside?
Okay, good question. Okay, so did anybody else notice that I didn't put the negative with the 6? Why would I do that? Because it's negative b, but it's, what is the first thing that you do?
You can't have
Well, you can, because we're going to deal with i's. We're going to let that happen. But what's the first thing that happens to that b? It's squared. So if I have a negative that's being squared, what does it turn into? A positive. Okay? And the other reason I do it is because you wouldn't believe how many times I say, what's negative 6 squared? And kids type it in the calculator, and guess what they tell me? Negative 6 squared. What's negative 6 squared? Right? They tell me it's negative 36. Because that's what the calculator will tell you. It does. Okay, because if you don't put parentheses around the negative 6, it'll square the 6 and then take the negative. Okay, so it does order of operations. It's truly doing the correct answer, but not to the person's intent. Right? Okay, so I just kill the negative immediately. That way you don't have that problem. So just never make a negative b right there in that spot. Okay, so we still have c. What's my c value? Negative 7. All over 2 times my a value, which is 1. Guys, what are we doing? Put your phone away. Okay, so in order to simplify the quadratic formula, I always start by simplifying the inside of the square root piece first. Okay? So on the inside, I have 6 squared. What's 6 squared? 36. Okay, and then does everybody see that after that I have minus a negative? See, there's 2 negatives after that? So what does minus a negative make? Positive, so I'm going to say plus. And then what's 4 times 1 times 7? 28, so plus 28. And then on the bottom, what's 2 times 1? 2. Okay. So now I can add those together. What's 36 plus 28? 64. Ooh, that's a nice number. I like that number. Okay, because the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so here comes a little bit of mental math. Okay, remember how many solutions are we coming up with? 2. Okay, so we're going to do the plus first. So it's 6 plus 8.
14.
And 14 divided by 2? 7. So 7 is 1. Okay, then we're going to do the minus. What's 6 minus 8? Negative 2. And negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. So the second solution is negative 1. Everybody follow that? Awesome?
You put, instead of a comma, put 4.
Sure. That would be okay. Yep. Okay, last question. Number 8. What do I have to do first? What must I always do?
Get the 2x squared.
Okay, we have to set it equal to 0. So I have 2 options. I can pull the negative or the 2x squared to the side where the other stuff is, or I can pull the other stuff to the same side as the 2x squared. And either way is right. There's not a wrong way to do that as long as you do it correctly. By habit, I always make my x squared positive. That's just the way I always do it because that's just how you do it when you factor, and so I just do it that way. So you don't have to do it that way, but that's how I'm going to do it. Okay, so it starts out as negative b. What's my negative b value? Negative b value? 8. So we got 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, 8 squared, minus 4 times the a, which is 2 times the c, 7, whoops, 7, all divided by 2 times the a, which we just said was 2. Okay. So on the inside I have 8 squared. What's 8 squared? 64. And then I'm going to subtract. I got 4 times 2. What's 4 times 2? 8 times 7? 56. Then I got 4 on the bottom. So then I can subtract 64 minus 56 is 8. Ah. Okay, so at this point I have to break the square root of 8. Okay, so let's see if we can do this mentally. What's a perfect square number that multiplies to 8? 4. 4 times what is 8?
2.
4 times 2. What's the square root of 4? 2. So we got 2 squared to 2. Everybody follow that? 2 square root of 2 is 8. Square root of 8. Alright, am I done? Not yet. How can I simplify this?
Divide by 4.
Close. Okay, remember when you're dividing something that has adding going on, you have to divide every single term. So I have to divide the 8, the 2, you can't touch the radical piece, and the 4. What are all 3 pieces divisible by? 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. Don't touch the radical. So I'm going to have 4 plus or minus 1 square root of 2, which I'm just going to say 1 square root of 2 is the square root of 2, all over 2. How many solutions do I have? 2. 2 solutions. Okay. Alright, so that is it for examples. I'm just going to explain one very quick thing that they go over, and this will be on your assignment, and it has to do with the discriminant. Okay, so the discriminant is simply the piece that's on the inside of the square root of your quadratic formula. Okay, so right here, this piece right here is your discriminant. Okay, so the discriminant tells you something about solutions. Okay, I'm going to call the discriminant D. Okay, if your discriminant happens to be a positive number, we'll call that greater than 0. That implies you have 2 real solutions. Whoa, sorry. Okay, a second scenario is if your D happens to equal 0. Anybody want to make a guess on if your D is equal to 0? How many solutions you would have?
1.
You would have exactly 1. Good guess. 1 real solution. If your D is negative, less than 0, what happens if you have a negative square root? It's an imaginary solution. Okay, so that tells you that you have no real solution, so make sure you read what they're asking you, how many reals, and that there are, in fact, 2 imaginaries. Solution. Is everybody good? Okay.